All right, welcome to week 5. This week we are reviewing the concept of development, which is a complex process that usually involves the transition of a country's economy from a more rudimentary agrarian to a more diversified economy. Political economists generally evaluate development in terms of economic expansion, and diversification, but also consider measures like quality of life and standard of living in order to get a more nuanced understanding of how changes in an economy are affecting the country's population as a whole, and not just those economic or political elites that are driving the development process. Some of the issues we'll be looking at this week include the assessment of how development influences human development, particularly how it affects life expectancy, infant mortality, literacy, overall quality of life, etc. Um, we'll consider how development influences gender relations and racial and ethnic identities in countries too. Oftentimes, the kinds of economic changes that take place during the development process force significant changes in gender relations as women in previously traditional societies find themselves in the workforce. A lot of times those changes, those kinds of changes are jarring for traditional societies and can negatively affect happiness and life satisfaction among affected populations. Um, I find, why does development happen to be an interesting question that we can certainly discuss the, various economic, social, and political rationales explaining why people in developing, countries decide they want to make that transition. In my admittedly limited experience in studying development, I've noticed a preponderance of three rationales: to enrich a particular group, to become more economically and militarily competitive, and idealistically to improve the lives of country's citizens, and those are not mutually exclusive. Um, but we also need to recognize that improvement or development comes at a price, which is oftentimes the sacrifice of traditional ways of living that many people experience as kind of a tragic loss. So the question why develop naturally leads to another question of how to pursue development. I expect the discussion surrounding the two principal strategies, market-led versus state-led development, will be interesting. As Americans, most of you will naturally think that market-led development is the best development strategy. But is market-led development always the best strategy for developing countries? We should probably exercise some caution before unreflectively, preferring markets to states when it comes to economic development. What happened in the former Warsaw Pact countries and in Russia is sort of an illustration that if the public sector is not ready for private markets, then the markets will become corrupted. An important aspect of the development is, again, you have to construct institutions that can support development. Strong economies require a mutually cooperative relationship between the public and private sectors. The institutions of the public sector do a great deal to protect and promote the health of a market-led economy. Without public institutions to protect private property and to protect consumers and workers, the wealthy and powerful can corrupt the marketplace to serve their own ends, leading to an economy that only serves the elites of society. And that has all too often been the outcome of the development process in many, many countries in Latin and Central America, Asia, and in Africa. The country we're dealing with this week, the profiling country, is Brazil. The profile starts on page 400. Make sure you read that profile carefully, and let's look at some contemporary media accounts of politics in Brazil and have a discussion about what's going on in Brazil and why it's an interesting country. We just have the weekly forum and the quiz this week, but next week is our first unit examination. So I hope you've been reviewing the material. If you have not been doing that well on the weekly quizzes, please take a look at the study guides and the PowerPoints on the course resources link if you haven't already done so. They can be helpful. Let's have a great week.